In the spring of 1220, the vast Mongol war machine, under the command of Genghis Khan, unleashed its fury upon the Khwarezmian Empire. Cities like Samarkand and Bukhara, once jewels of Islamic civilization, crumbled under the relentless siege of Mongol armies. While Genghis Khan pursued Khwarezmshah Muhammad II into the Caspian Sea, a critical and ultimately devastating reconnaissance mission was inaugurated. This was no mere scouting party, it was a deep penetration into previously unknown lands, led by two of the greatest military minds in history, Subutai and Jebe. Their objective, to survey the regions north and west of the Caspian Sea, a journey that would irrevocably alter the course of Eastern European history. Jebe, known as the Arrow, was a former bandit, once an enemy who nearly killed Genghis Khan himself. His loyalty, tactical brilliance, and daring courage endeared him to the great Khan. Subutai, the dog of war, was a commoner, a fierce tactician, and a master of logistics and grand strategy. He possessed an uncanny ability to understand terrain and enemy disposition, earning him a reputation as one of the most successful generals of all time. Together, they led an army initially estimated between 20,000 and 30,000 men. This force, while substantial, was a fraction of the total Mongol army, yet its impact would be monumental. Their campaign began in 1220, chasing the Khwarezmshah's son, Jalal al-Din Mingburnu, through Persia. While Jalal al-Din momentarily checked a Mongol force at the Battle of Parwan in September 1221, Subutai and Jebe were already operating independently. Their primary mission shifted from pursuit to reconnaissance, pushing westward. They first encountered the Kingdom of Georgia, a powerful Orthodox Christian state in the Caucasus. In September 1220, near the town of Koinon, the Georgians, led by King George IV Lasha, initially mistook the Mongols for simple raiders. They launched an attack, expecting an easy victory. However, the Mongols, employing their characteristic feigned retreat tactic, lured the Georgians into a devastating ambush. The Georgian cavalry, confident and swift, charged hard, only to find themselves enveloped, outflanked, and cut down mercilessly. King George IV himself was severely wounded, and the Georgian army suffered heavy losses. Battered but not broken, the Georgians attempted another stand in January 1221 at the Battle of Bargujam, likely near the modern-day city of Tbilisi. This time, the Mongols were better prepared for the mountainous terrain and bitter winter. Again, the Georgians were decisively defeated, their kingdom thoroughly plundered. These victories against a seasoned and well-equipped army like Georgia's sent immediate shockwaves through the region. The Mongols were not just nomadic raiders, they were a professional, disciplined fighting force of unparalleled brutality and effectiveness. After devastating Georgia, Subutai and Jebe's army wheeled north, aiming to circumnavigate the Caspian Sea to rejoin Genghis Khan. This required them to pass through the formidable barrier of the Caucasus Mountains. The only viable path was the Derbent Pass, often called the Caspian Gates. This narrow defile, barely wide enough for a few horses abreast, was heavily fortified and defended by the Alans and the Kipchak Cumans. The Cumans, a powerful Turkic nomadic people, were a dominant force in the Pontic steppe, controlling vast territories between the Dniester River and the Volga. Recognizing the tactical impossibility of a frontal assault against the combined Alan-Cuman defenses in such a constricted space, Subutai and Jebe employed their masterful political cunning. They sent envoys to the Cumans, pointing out their shared nomadic heritage and offering a separate peace, along with a share of the plunder from the Alans. The Mongols bribed the Cuman tribal leaders with promises of easy riches and persuaded them to abandon their Alan allies. This calculated deception proved immensely successful. The Cumans, swayed by the allure of plunder and the promise of escaping Mongol wrath, withdrew their forces. With the Cuman-Alan alliance dissolved, the Mongols swiftly attacked the isolated Alans. The Alans, though fierce fighters, were no match for the full force of Subutai and Jebe's army. They were crushed, their lands ravaged. Having eliminated the Alans, the Mongols then turned immediately upon their former, albeit temporary allies, the Cumans. The Mongol army, having now secured its passage through the mountains, ruthlessly pursued the fleeing Cuman forces across the open steppe. Many Cumans were massacred, their leaders captured and executed. This betrayal would have long-lasting consequences, creating a deep-seated fear and hatred of the Mongols among the remaining Cuman tribes. The surviving Cumans, scattered and desperate, fled westward into the territories of the Rus's principalities. They sought asylum and military assistance from their former rivals. Many Cuman leaders, including Khan Khotan, the powerful chieftain of the Don Cumans, appealed to the Rus's princes. Khotan was even the father-in-law of Mstislav Mstislavich the Daring, Prince of Halych, a prominent Rus's leader. The appeal was urgent. The Cuman Khans warned the Rus's princes that if they did not help them, the Mongols would eventually come for them too. "Today they have taken our land, tomorrow they will take yours," was the stark message. The Rus's princes, despite centuries of intermittent conflict with the Cumans, recognized the gravity of the situation. Their long-standing grievances were overshadowed by the terrifying prospect of this new, unknown, and seemingly unstoppable enemy. In a rare display of unity, the Rus princes, Inkul, Uding, Mstislav Mstislavich of Halych, Mstislav Romanovich, the Old of Kiev, the most senior prince, and Daniel Romanovich of Volhynia, gathered their forces. Others, like Prince Sviatoslav III of Chernigov, also joined the coalition. The combined host of Rus's and Cuman forces was formidable, perhaps numbering around 80,000 men by some estimates, though precise figures are notoriously difficult to ascertain for medieval armies. What is certain is that it constituted one of the largest coalitions of Rus's and Cuman forces ever assembled. The Rus princes and their Cuman allies began to move southeast, intending to confront the Mongols before they could establish a strong foothold. Their early engagements were not without success. In March 1223, a smaller Mongol detachment, sent out as a forward scouting party, was ambushed and decisively defeated by a combined Rus's and Cuman force near the Dnieper River. This initial Russian victory, though against a smaller Mongol element, instilled a dangerous overconfidence among the Rus princes. It reinforced their belief that these Tatarin, as they called the Mongols, were mere raiders who could be easily repelled. Subutai and Jebe, however, were masters of intelligence. They knew the Rus were approaching, and they deliberately employed tactics to draw them deeper into the steppe, away from their fortified cities and supply lines. They sent envoys to the Rus's princes, claiming that they meant no harm to the Rus's themselves, only to the Cumans. This was a classic Mongol tactic of sowing discord and attempting to divide their enemies before engaging them directly. The Rus's princes, however, having witnessed the Mongols' betrayal of the Alans and Cumans, refused to believe these overtures. They executed the Mongol envoys, an act that deeply offended the Mongols and ensured that no mercy would be shown in the ensuing battle. The Mongols continued their feigned retreat for several days, drawing the Rus and Cuman forces further east across the steppes towards the Kalka River, a small tributary flowing into the Sea of Azov. This retreat was meticulously organized, involving light rearguard actions designed to harass, but not fully engage the pursuing army. Each day, the Mongols would retreat, baiting the Rus into thinking they were fleeing in disarray. The Rus's and Cuman forces, confident from their earlier skirmish and eager for a decisive blow, pressed on relentlessly. Their primary strategical error was this aggressive, disorganized pursuit. The Rus's princes, known for their independent nature and often competing ambitions, failed to maintain a unified command structure. Mstislav Mstislavich, the Daring, was particularly impetuous, often acting without full coordination with his peers. By late May 1223, the two armies were nearing the Kalka River. The Mongols had carefully chosen their battlefield, a vast open plain, perfectly suited for their mounted archers and strategic maneuvers. On May 30th, the advanced guard of the Rus's army, consisting primarily of Cuman cavalry and a contingent of Volhynian Russes under Daniel Romanovich, encountered the main Mongol force on the western bank of the Kalka River. Mstislav Mstislavich, leading the vanguard, decided to attack immediately, without waiting for the bulk of the Kievan army under Mstislav Romanovich to cross the river and form up in battle array. This was a fatal blunder, splitting the Rus's forces. The battle began with a charge by the Cuman cavalry, supported by Daniel Romanovich's cavalry. Initially, they achieved some success, pushing back the Mongol vanguard. However, this was precisely what Subutai and Jebe intended. The Mongol vanguard slowly gave ground, drawing the combined Russes and Cuman forces deeper into the ambush. As the Russes and Cumans pressed their advantage, the full Mongol army, arranged in a crescent formation, revealed itself. The Mongol flanks, employing their devastating tulgama, or whirlwind attack, began to envelope the overextended enemy. The Mongol archers, famed for their composite bows, rained down a torrent of arrows, weakening the enemy cohesion. Their cavalry, expertly maneuvering, executed repeated charges and feigned retreats, breaking up the enemy formations. The light Cuman cavalry, though numerous, was ill-equipped to deal with the disciplined, coordinated tactics of the Mongols. They soon broke and fled, causing widespread panic. The rout of the Cumans exposed the flanks of the Rus' infantry and cavalry, leaving them vulnerable. Mstislavich's forces, now largely unsupported, were fighting a desperate battle. Daniel Romanovich displayed considerable bravery, even suffering wounds in the thick of the fight. But the Mongol relentless pressure, their superior tactical coordination, and the sheer volume of their arrows began to take their toll. The Rus' vanguard, after fierce resistance, was shattered. Many fell, others were captured, and the rest fled in disarray back towards the Dnieper. The fleeing cavalry and infantry collided with the main Kievan army under Mstislav Romanovich, which was still crossing or attempting to consolidate its position on the eastern bank of the Kalka. This collision created immense chaos and disorder, making any organized defense impossible. Mstislav Romanovich, the Old, realizing the catastrophe developing, ordered his forces to entrench themselves on a small hill on the eastern bank of the Kalka. He formed a stockade with his wagons, hoping to create a defensive redoubt against the Mongol onslaught. This was the wise decision for a trapped army, but it was too little, too late. The Mongols, having routed the vanguard, now turned their full attention to the Kievan forces. For 3 agonizing days, from May 31st to June 2nd, the Kievan stockade endured a brutal siege. The entrenched Ruses fought with valor, repelling repeated Mongol attacks. However, they were without water and relief. The Mongols, understanding the psychological and physical toll this would take, patiently maintained their siege, launching occasional raids and firing arrows, slowly wearing down the defenders. On the 3rd day, the Ruses' resolve began to crumble. Sensing their imminent collapse, the Mongols once again resorted to deception. They sent envoys to Mstislav Romanovich, promising that if the Ruses laid down their arms, they would be allowed to return to Kiev unharmed. A Cuman commander named Pluskinia, who had come over to the Mongol side, even swore an oath on his sword in the presence of the Ruses' princes, guaranteeing their safety. Desperate and parched, the Ruses' princes, including Mstislav Romanovich, accepted these terms. They emerged from their stockade, disarmed, only to be met with a horrifying betrayal. As soon as the Ruses surrendered, the Mongols fell upon them. The promise of safe passage was a cruel lie. All the captured princes, including Mstislav Romanovich of Kiev, Sviatoslav of Chernigov, and others, were brutally executed. The exact method of their execution became a chilling legend. They were laid out on the ground, pinned beneath heavy wooden planks, and then covered with a large platform. The Mongol generals, including Subutai and Jebe, then celebrated their victory by holding a feast on top of this platform, slowly suffocating the princes to death. This act of barbarity was a deliberate message. The Mongols accorded no mercy to those who resisted, and they punished any perceived disrespect or defiance with extreme cruelty. The execution of the envoys by the Ruses' princes earlier had sealed their fate. The massacre extended beyond the princes. Thousands of ordinary Ruses and Cuman soldiers were also slaughtered in the aftermath. The entire Ruses and Cuman coalition was annihilated. The few who managed to escape, such as Mstislav Mstislavich, who had retreated across the Dnieper, brought back tales of utter devastation and unimaginable horror. Chronicles describe how the Ruses' principalities were plunged into mourning, their populations decimated. It is estimated that up to 70 Ruses' princes and boyars, along with tens of thousands of soldiers, perished at the Kalka River. The battle was a catastrophic loss for the Ruses' people, stripping them of their aristocratic and military leadership. After their decisive victory at the Kalka River, Subutai and Jebe continued their westward reconnaissance. They pursued the remnants of the Cuman tribes, pushing into the Crimea, where they sacked the Genoese trading city of Subutai in 1223. This demonstrated their reach and their ability to operate far from their main armies and traditional supply lines. From Crimea, they turned east again. Their journey back towards the main Mongol forces involved another daring feat. To avoid the fortified Volotsky region, modern-day Saratov, the Mongols chose to pass through the territory of the Volga Bulgars. The Bulgars, a powerful Turkic state along the middle Volga River, had formidable defenses and a well-organized army. In the spring of 1224, Subutai and Jebe's forces engaged the Volga Bulgars in what became known as the Battle of Samara Bend, or the Battle of Kurnek. This time the Mongols suffered a rare defeat. The Bulgars, fighting on their home territory and likely employing cunning tactics of their own, perhaps utilizing a similar feigned retreat into a prepared ambush, as the Mongols themselves had perfected, managed to inflict heavy losses on the Mongol army. Some historical accounts even suggest the Mongols were decisively defeated and forced to pay tribute. This battle, though often overshadowed by Kalka, demonstrates that Subutai and Jebe's army was not invincible, and highlights the logistical challenges and dangers of their extensive campaign. Despite this setback, Subutai and Jebe successfully rejoined Genghis Khan's main forces in Central Asia in 1224. Their epic journey had covered thousands of miles, traversed diverse and hostile territories, and achieved its primary objective, the collection of invaluable intelligence about the lands and peoples to the west. They brought back detailed reports on the Rus principalities, the Lithuanians, the Hungarians, and the various nomadic tribes of the steppe. This information would prove crucial for Batu Khan's western campaign almost 13 years later in 1236, as it directly informed the Mongols' strategic planning and assault routes. The Kalka River Massacre stands as one of the most brutal and strategically significant battles in medieval history. It marked the first encounter between the Mongols and the Rus, and it was a devastating education for the Rus' princes. The immediate consequences were catastrophic, a massive loss of life and leadership, weakening the Rus' states. The long-term consequences were even more profound. The Kalka River battle set the stage for the full-scale Mongol invasion of Rus in 1237 to 1240, which would lead to 2 centuries of Mongol rule, the Tatar yoke, over much of Eastern Europe. The Mongol invasion fundamentally reshaped the political, social, and economic landscape of Rus. Cities were destroyed, populations decimated, and trade routes disrupted. The center of political power shifted from Kiev to the northeastern principalities, particularly Vladimir and later Moscow. The Mongol rule stunted the development of Rus in many ways, isolating it from Western European cultural and technical advancements. However, it also inadvertently fostered a stronger sense of shared identity among the disparate Rus principalities, ultimately contributing to the eventual emergence of a centralized Russian state. The campaign of Subutai and Jebe, culminating in the Kalka River Massacre, was not merely a military reconnaissance. It was a psychological operation of immense scale. It introduced the Mongol terror to Europe, spreading fear and demonstrating the Mongols' military superiority, their ruthlessness, and their sophisticated tactica and strategic capabilities. Their journey showcased the extraordinary resilience and logistical prowess of the Mongol army, capable of operating independently for years in enemy territory, living off the land, and repeatedly overcoming numerically superior forces. Jebe, the daring arrow, would die shortly after rejoining Genghis Khan, likely from illness or exhaustion from the grueling campaign, around 1225. Subutai, the unparalleled dog of war, would live on to command the main forces of the Western campaign, orchestrating the devastating invasions of Rus, Hungary, and Poland. He died in 1248, one of the most successful military commanders in history, having personally led armies that conquered more territory than any general before or since. The Battle of the Kalka River serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of disunity and misjudgment in the face of a disciplined, innovative, and ruthless enemy. For the Rus' princes, it was a bitter lesson learned at an immense cost, a prelude to a storm that would engulf their lands and alter their destiny for centuries to come. The Mongols, having demonstrated their reach and power, would eventually return, forever changing the map of Eastern Europe. The Kalka River, a seemingly insignificant stream in the vast Pontic steppe, became the site of a pivotal and bloody encounter that reverberated throughout history. The silence that fell over the Kalka following the slaughter was not merely the end of a battle, it was the chilling prelude to an era of conquest and subjugation. The ground where the Rus' princes were suffocated became a grim monument to Mongol supremacy and tactical genius. This event, often overlooked in Western history, was a transformative moment for the East, setting in motion a chain of events that reshaped nations and civilizations. The tactical genius displayed by Subutai against a larger, though disunited force is a case study in military strategy. His comprehensive use of intelligence, deception, feigned retreats, and concentrated force on chosen points demonstrated a sophistication far beyond conventional medieval warfare. The Mongols excelled in combined arms tactics, using their formidable mounted archers to soften the enemy, followed by cavalry charges, and maintaining reserves for decisive flanking maneuvers. Their communications were exceptionally fluid, allowing for rapid adjustments on the battlefield, a stark contrast to the often cumbersome command structures of their European and Middle Eastern adversaries. The Rus princes, tied to their individual retinues and feudal loyalties, struggled to achieve such fluidity. Each prince held sway over his own contingent, leading to a lack of central command and often competing strategies or outright insubordination. This disunity was ultimately their undoing against the unified purpose and singular command of Subutai and Jebe. The human cost was staggering. Beyond the princes, countless rank-and-file soldiers, vital to the agricultural and craft economy of the principalities, were lost. This demographic blow would weaken the Rus' states for years, making them even more susceptible to future invasions. The tales of Kalka spread fear, but also planted a seed of understanding about the nature of this new threat. However, the political fragmentation within Rus' meant that this lesson, though dearly bought, was not fully heeded until the Mongols returned in force under Batu Khan. The Kalka River represented not just a battle, but a brutal, unforgettable introduction to the era of Mongol dominion. The campaign also highlights the extraordinary endurance of Mongol horses and riders, covering such vast distances, from the Caspian shores to the Caucasus across the Pontic steppe, and then to the Volga, all while fighting and raiding, required exceptional horsemanship, logistical planning for fodder and water, and an unwavering drive. Their living off the land approach facilitated their deep penetration, but also meant immense devastation for the regions they passed through. This method of warfare, combined with their mobility, made traditional defensive strategies largely ineffective. Fortified cities could be bypassed and starved out, while armies, no matter how large, struggled to catch or corner them on the open steppe. The events of 1223, while disastrous for the Rus, also served as a dark prologue for the rest of Europe. Had the Ruses and Cumans united more effectively, or had Western Europe taken the threat more seriously, history might have unfolded differently. But the immediate aftermath saw the Mongols withdrawing, leaving a temporary vacuum and giving European powers a false sense of security regarding the true scale of the Mongol threat. They would learn, eventually, that Kalka was just the first tremor before the earthquake. The names Subutai and Jebe, while revered in Mongol history, became synonymous with terror and destruction in the annals of Eastern Europe. Their audacious campaign remains a testament to military genius and unparalleled strategic execution, reshaping the world in their wake. The legacy of Kalka is etched into the very identity of the nations it affected, a memory of devastation that propelled centuries of struggle and transformation.